preparing to stream live. Just give a sec here.
Saying live on YouTube on my top corner.
Here we are.
I think we are.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Yes, we are. We are indeed. Well, hey, happy Friday. Yes.
To everyone, not just us, because we're live. We live streaming's great because you get to see all of it, including the foibles and the tangle ups, and but you know we're here.
Well, we should really explain today that we had set up a newfangled live stream with all the software and stuff, and we tested it. Sean and I tested it yesterday, right?
Yeah, last night.
Yeah, but the same as always. What happens is that you bump into tech issues, and here we are, right?
There's something we got to figure it out. It's probably user error. It's not.
It might have been my third window that screwed it up. But as they say in show business, the show must go on. And here we are.
Yeah, to borrow a phrase from a movie, you get tangled up, you just tango on. So we're here to talk about BC assessment because it's January. I'm sure you guys have received your own notices, guys.
We have indeed.
Yeah, I've got one for my place and for my rental property. So it's nice to see kind of how those things differ. And, one's a condo, one's a townhouse, and slightly different markets. And it's always interesting. But, we've been talking a lot about the market and giving our market updates here. But I think we really wanted to break down, we might have told, you might have seen your house sell down the street and it sold for a big number. And then you get your tax assessment and it's much lower or much higher than that recent sale in the street. So I think we're here today to break that down.
Yeah. Well, the biggest things about assessments that is that they are intended to the government's attempt to evenly and fairly spread the tax burden for schools and roads across the population. And it's not intended to be market value. It's a snapshot of the value of your property as of July 1st in the previous year. So this is the government's assessment of your property as of July 1st of 2020.
Yeah, I like that, Sean. What I always try to tell people is I like the term, it's your taxable value, because really that is the only purpose of that, right? And BC assessment, I think on that form, they used to say market value, and I think they've changed some of the terminology because, as you know, I think all three of us have walked into houses and people say, well, I need to get at least my assessment. And maybe we're telling you your house is worth more, so you don't want more money.
100%. And, sometimes people contact us and say, where should we list? And I'm one of my favorite things is to remind people I can show you the data for every property that sells close to its assessed value. We can show you two more that sold far above and two more that sold far below their assessed value.
Yeah. Well, a story that I always enjoy talking about is one that happened to me many years ago, and I had, a different market. I mean, right now we're in a busy, hot market where things sell. Normal markets, things take some time, right? And I had a condo listed for sale over the Christmas holidays, and it didn't sell. Come January, of course, the sellers reached out to me and said, "Hey, my assessment went up, whatever it was, 20 grand," and they said we have to raise our price because the assessment went up, right? And, to which I said, well, all right, hold on a second here, guys. The place is still for sale, which means that, whatever it was, let's say it was $250,000 back then. Nobody was willing to pay $250,000 yesterday, which means that they're not going to pay $275,000 today just because the assessment authority says that, right? But there's more, right? Because see, what happened is they were looking at a house in Strawberry Vale. And of course, with the BC Assessment Authority, even back then, you can go online. And then in front of the computer, I said to them, I go, hey, that house you were looking at whatever road it was? It went up $40,000. So I guess you're okay paying $40,000 more for that house just because the Assessment Authority said so, right? And they're like, no. I'm like, hey, it works on both sides, right?
Yeah. And Tony, Kyle, and for all the viewers, if anyone's watching this in the future, it's currently January 2021, and if you're scratching your head wondering where that $250,000 house in Strawberry Vale is, it doesn't exist. It's just an example.
Hey, the condo was 250. The house was probably it was like maybe 500,000 or something. Right?
But I mean, when assessments go up, guys, I mean, how does, if people want to know, okay, well, how is BC assessment putting these values together? How are they determining if your property value has gone up?
Tony, you want to?
The first question I always ask is, have you ever had an assessor physically walk into your house? Because there's 2.1 million properties in British Columbia. That's a lot of work for an army of assessors to go through and view every property. So they don't, right? In fact, my dad, I remember, he would not let an assessor in the house. He knocked on the door. He's like, "No, get out." Because at the time, my dad's attitude, and I think it's the same with many people right now, is I don't want them knowing what my house is like. Because I don't want them assessing it higher, because then I'm going to pay more taxes. We'll talk about that in a moment too, right? So the best the assessment authority can do is guess. And when they guess, what I mean is they look at what you paid for the house. So my parents bought that house in 1962 for $14,700, by the way, $14,700. And because they didn't sell for until 2000 and whatever, I think it was 16, right? That's 50 years of non-sale data because there wasn't a sale, right? So the best the assessment authority could do is apply the plus and minuses year after year after year. 1 year properties went up 3%, the next year it went down, because they do go down every once in a while. They don't always go up, right? So that is how the evaluation works, which is the reason why this is just the theory of mine. And, maybe you guys have seen it. Maybe whoever's watching sees this as well too. Generally speaking, the assessments on houses that have not sold for decades are far less accurate than the ones that have recently sold. Because you see, if the assessment for a house that sold last year will at least be a little closer, because the sale last year was $900,000, and they reset. They go, okay, the value is $900,000 right there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. So something that sold 3 years ago or 5 years ago, at least a little closer than 50 years ago or 70 years ago. Right.
Well, speaking of guessing, the terminology that the assessment authority often uses for guessing is they use averages and algorithms from similar type homes to derive your assessed value. Interestingly, one of my roommates from my university days is one of the assessors here on Vancouver Island, nowhere near Victoria. And he had worked in the Okanagan, but he's gotten up there because he's been working for the assessment authority for a while. I haven't talked to him for quite a few years, but he did tell me about 8 years ago that the assessors get into about 2% of the properties in any given year. So after that, they're guessing, as Tony says, but they're using averages and algorithms. They're looking at sale data on the MLS and private sales as well, and then they also try and apply building permits. But that's hard for them to do, especially when they used to only come up with the assessments or do the assessment roll, as they refer to it, every 2 years, but they do it annually. And so, as Tony mentioned, 2.1 million houses. Trying to appraise 2.1 million houses every single year is just beyond the scope of almost anything. So it may be a different number. It may be higher or lower than 2% these days. I haven't asked recently, but that's where the guesses come from.
Yeah, and as Sean, as you said there, that the real estate boards and the active MLSs in BC the BC assessment has an active feed to that. So they are able to, even if that house of 50 years hasn't been assessed, where they're getting that 3% for the neighborhood is coming from those MLS sales. Potentially they're using Land Core data or BC Land Titles data for sold prices there as well. And they're trying to assess it. And again, they generally know the basic details of your home from the original building permit. But I mean, most houses from the 1960s now have secondary suites. A lot of those aren't registered. So, I mean, you could have a significant add-on in value there that, again, no one knows, and understanding that. So yeah, it's gotten a little bit more sophisticated, but again, it's a blanket assessment across a whole neighborhood. And as we know with Victoria neighborhoods, at least, I mean, every house can be slightly different, design, shape, size, just because of how Victoria has been built out. So yeah, you need to get in more specifics. And as we say, market value really is what is a buyer willing to pay and a seller willing to sell it for.
You know, an example that I use every once in a while is Regents Park, right? 1020 View Street, right? It's a condo building built in 1990. There's only two floor plans. There's the Ascot and the Balmoral, right? We got the, whatever it is, 970 square feet and the 1100 square foot, right? And it's because the only differences are the elevation and the exposure, right?
Yeah.
And it's amazing when you look at the tax roll of the units there, you know, side by side Ascots, which might have a, whatever it is, a 10-degree difference in view, their assessments can be completely way off, right?
Yeah.
And you know, that's really the litmus is you know, how close are the numbers, and they're not. But the point being that the assessment is not really meant for consumers to use for market value, because it's not market value.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I had a similar case. We were selling the Ovation building. This is years and years ago.
Esquimalt,
and so
1350 in Esquimalt.
Yeah, so we were representing the developer still. So we still had about 15, 20 vacant units. We had two units side by side, 401, 402, exact same floor plan, exact same square footage, almost the exact same view. Rent rolls came out the next year, or tax rolls came out the next year. One of them went up by 40,000, and this was a pretty flat market. One of them went up by 40,000, and the other one went down 5. And our developer client asked us to consult with them and give them some advice. And so when they called, the assessor said, "Oh, well, the one has an ocean view and the other one doesn't." And she's like, "Well, no, I'm standing in the condo right now talking to you, and they both have almost the same view." So again, that's where maybe the algorithm because again, they're trying to do 2.1 million homes in the same year. Like, there are going to be little glitches, and again, it's meant there to be a fair enough value that you're okay paying your taxes on it.
Okay, let's talk about this one though. I mean, appeals. Right?
Well, appeals. And we have some important dates because we're getting close to that timeline, aren't we, Sean?
We are, but I'm going to throw back to you, Kyle, because I was busy working on the tech side of things and then failed to look up the dates.
February 1.
Yeah. But yeah, you can go ahead and appeal, and quite often, you know, you can affect a change. It's not often as easy as the two examples you guys just gave, where you've got very uniform developments or very uniform products with just slightly different, especially as you talked earlier, Kyle, in Greater Victoria. Most of the major big development were at the tip of an island. It was finished. The big developments were done in the 50s and 60s. So it's led to, there's continued development, but it's in very small pockets now. And so there's great, it's getting an apples to apples comparison isn't as easy as in maybe some other larger Canadian cities where there's uniform development, but you can certainly appeal your assessed values, but that's not necessarily going to lead to a proportionate decrease in your property taxes.
Well, first of all, we've got a couple of people watching live right now, and I want to say to those of you watching, if you have any questions, just type in the chat function of YouTube here, and we'll be happy to answer any question that you have. You know, the getting back to the assessment, because there's that whole thought process of, well, if just like Sean brought up, if my assessment goes down, my taxes should go down as well too. And the thing that I typically compare assessment to is unit entitlement in condos, right? So in a condo, you've got a schedule, it's a unit entitlement, and basically it's the amount of shares you own in your condo relative to the grand scheme of the condo development, right? And that's how they determine how much your strata fees are, right? And it's the same with the assessment. It is the municipality's way of figuring out, compared to the rest of the municipality writ large, how much, what your share of the upcoming tax budget is, right? So, you know, here's a scary thought. If they were to reduce a whole bunch of people's assessments, they're going to be looking to raise other people's assessments, right?
Yeah.
So and I don't know about you guys, but I have found that the majority of people I know that attempted to appeal their assessment were not successful.
I haven't heard many success stories lately either because of like you're saying, I mean, the money has to come from somewhere. And I mean, you really would have to show that the house, as Sean said, either developments where it's a bit easier. I mean, I did have one time up in Mill Bay. It was an estate type situation where the house was, it was a half acre of oceanfront in Mill Bay. Beautiful property, had its own little private beach, but the house was literally falling down. Like there were support posts that there was an above ground oil tank that had flipped over that was leaking. So we ended up selling that property for $220,000 below the assessment. And so someone from BC Assessment called and said, what happened? You know, all the properties along that strip are all almost multi-million-dollar homes. And I said, well, it was the one little ugly duckling left from the 1950s that there was a $50,000 oil remediation. There was this, there was that. And they said, oh, okay, great information. And so definitely, yeah, the non-uniformity, as Sean spoke to, is really important. And with those appeals, I mean, you got to remember that you're asking them to come into your home and potentially, and so what other can of worms are you potentially opening, right? And the reporting, because BC Assessment is liaisoning with your local municipality, because Sean mentioned it earlier. If you do go out and put a legal suite in your home or build a legal carriage house or something to add dramatic value, they will be able to find that information because they are accessing those files. But, you know, maybe if there's a report back to the municipality that you've added a bunch of value and additions and suites to your home, you might get a knock from the municipality next saying, we've been made aware of a large increase in value. So you got to be careful in that. But those appeal panels, so you need to know by February 1st if you want to appeal. And then for about 6 weeks, they have the property assessment review panel. So this is this process we're talking about where you kind of renegotiate with the assessor to get your value to somewhere maybe you're looking for.
And then again, you know, you're having that argument with them right now. And of course, the assessor's job is to say, well, it doesn't matter what it's worth on January 22nd. It's what it was on July the 1st, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, whatever, to 6 months ago. So it's like, well, okay, you know, this is not an exact science. I guess that's what we're getting at here, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, and you can, go ahead, Sean.
No, I was just going to say, and also keep in mind that there's not a direct correlation between your assessed value and your taxes. There is in Alberta. If we've got anybody from Alberta looking out there, if your assessment changes in Alberta by say 10%, you can expect your property taxes to go in the same direction by the same percentage. Not the case here in BC. So even if you are successful in lowering your assessment, your property taxes aren't going to go down as proportionally. And if you ever want to sell in the near future, although we're explaining that there's a disconnect between market value and assessed value, a lot of buyers potential buyers for your home would still look at the assessed value and then maybe try and make a case, you know, about pricing it from there.
Oh, thanks for bringing that up. Thanks for bringing that up. Because you know what? This is what I love about assessed values. Okay, this is gripe time, right? Consumers want the assessment to be low when they're living there with no idea, no plan to sell, because there's the impression that they're going to pay less taxes. But when it comes time for them to sell, they want it to be high because then it looks good.
100%.
Right? Which again is the reason why the assessment really is not an accurate statement of what a property will sell for. It is always what your neighbors or properties in the neighboring areas that are similar have sold for recently. That's how you establish value. It's not assessed value. I'm glad that gone are the days where realtors would advertise, great deal below assessed value, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean? You know, it's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I've seen a few of those ads recently.
Have you?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess it's just a marketing tactic, I guess, and maybe it brings some people in. But yeah, I agree. It doesn't actually really mean anything. You know, I always tell people the assessed value might be in the stadium or in the ballpark of where your value might be, but that could be a massive, Dallas
Range.
Cowboys size stadium where, you could have 100 to 200,000 on either side. Right. And I mean, if you are someone though that thinks there is a big issue, I mean, as realtors, we can go back in time and look at old sales and maybe provide you some guidance. And there are some good appraisal companies in town that are doing this for a lot of times. That's more on the commercial side. And because one thing people should know, Tony, is you talked about the city being divided up into tax rates. Our friends on the industrial commercial side, their tax rates are generally quite higher. And those properties might have rezoning potential. And so they will sometimes challenge their assessments, but they're also paying, $3 to $5 million in property taxes potentially. I remember Frank Leonard, the former Saanich mayor, talking about when they approved the Uptown project. So that was a big controversial vote, right? And he was the split vote. And so Town and Country Mall only made the city of Saanich about $4 million a year in property taxes. When they approved Uptown, it went to $40 million. That was the difference in revenue being created from that property because of the development and all the new usage there. And he said at a time when we were in a recession, it actually allowed Saanich's budget to increase and keep staff and do some other projects. So it's interesting on the commercial side how much this can be in effect.
Hey guys, by the way, I got a call out from our buddy Steve over in Surrey. He's watching us right now. It must be a quiet day in the office. Hey Steve, hopefully everything's okay over there.
Welcome.
Hope you guys can find some inventory. So anyways, assessments again. It's such an interesting story. But I guess the summary that we're talking about here is they are not relevant. People do not buy based on what an assessment value is because they're all over the map. It's handy for taxation purposes of the municipality. I would say that if you're a concerned citizen, sure, you should be concerned about your assessment. You should also then be looking at your municipal budget and paying a close attention of what your municipality is doing. Do they have major infrastructure things coming up? I'm in Oak Bay. We're going to be talking about this whole, storm drain line and all that kind of stuff one of these days. Pay attention because you got to know what is coming forward as far as expenses and costs in the in coming days, right? So.
And speaking of that, I don't have many of the details, Tony, but in the near future, from a planner that I know up Island, who previously worked down here for the city of Victoria, has told me that it's going to be law soon where all the municipalities in BC must disclose what their infrastructure replacement costs are.
Interesting. So it's kind of like a depreciation report for
Exactly,
municipalities.
for all of them, and it's going to reflect what spending or lack thereof and where it has been done or not.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. But no, Tony, that's a great point because, as you said, it's that city budget that the taxes have to make up for. So, are you paying attention to our local politicians and where the money is being spent and is it being spent efficiently? And I mean, those are hardworking people, city workers are great. We're not saying anything there. It's just, things need to be done efficiently and big infrastructure projects. I think a lot of people forget those pipes are under the ground. So it's like, you can't remember what you can't see, but I mean, Oak Bay, yeah, there's some other, we're Victoria, we're an old town, right? We've got areas that still, I think, have wooden storm drains, don't we?
Yes.
Well, yeah. How long, we've been maybe 6 weeks where the sewage treatment plant's been up and running too, right, guys? And that, I mean, there was contributions from the federal and the provincial government, but also all the municipalities had to chip in. And we have,
what was it, $750 million, right? Whatever.
Oh, yeah, it was more than that, I think now. I think it was close. Yeah, it was closer to the big one, but at any rate, those are, as Kyle says, you just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So,
well, hey, thank those of you who have been watching live here today, and even if you're watching after the fact, if you have questions, you want to talk about assessment and what it's all about, even get an idea of your home. Because, by the way, it's 2021 right now. So there's a little call out for you because we are suffering right now from zero inventory in the marketplace. And for anyone who's thinking about selling their home right now, I get it. It's easier to sell right now. You might be scared about where you're going to go. We can have a conversation about that, right? But something that we've been telling people too is now is really a good market. If you've got a house that has things to do, if you've got unfinished projects, if you haven't finished paving the driveway, things that, you've been stressed about, that you want to get done before you sell. Well, guess what? Today, you don't need to worry about that. because if you've got those things, someone will pay you a crazy dollar for your home because of the fact that there's no inventory. And here's an even better one. If you're in the point right now where you're going to move into a condo because our condo market isn't quite as hot, maybe it's a great downsizers market. You guys agree with that, right?
100%.
100%. Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, thanks everyone for joining. Anything else there, boys?
No, I think we're good. I mean, just if you have more questions, reach out to us, and don't use your assessed value as some form of indicator for market value.
Yeah, it's always good to know the value of your house. So even if you don't want to sell and you're curious, feel free to give us a shout.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. We are Sean, Kyle, Tony, Joe from the Prime Real Estate team. Happy January. And if anyone here would like to receive our monthly updates, which we do provide, we do post them here on YouTube. We also send them out by email. So send us a message. Let us know. We'd be happy to add you to our list. See you, everyone.